Welcome back. Japan plans to invest approximately $36 billion in the United States, focusing on critical minerals, oil and gas infrastructure, and power generation. This is part of a $550 billion strategic trade and investment agreement with the Trump administration. So for further insights, we welcome now Matt Gertken, Chief Geopolitical and U.S. Political Strategist at BCA Research. It's good to have you join us. Thanks so much.
Hi, thank you, Lindsay. Good to be with you.
So this is interesting when you look at these three projects: a natural gas plant in Ohio, a crude oil export facility on the Gulf Coast, and a synthetic diamond manufacturing site in Georgia. Apart from maybe getting rid of the most strenuous kind of duties imposed by the U.S., is there any benefit here to Japan when you look at any of these three projects?
Yeah, we should keep in mind that Japan is the #1 foreign investor in the United States. They have a historic relationship and a strategic partnership that's strengthening as China emerges. And so they have both strategic and economic reasons. Japan has invested $800 billion over the years in the U.S. And so all they really have to do is continue to do what they've done in the past, and maybe top it up a little bit. They've promised, when you compare the sort of growth rate with what they've done, they're suggesting they can add about $100 billion on top of the trend over the past decade. And they may not get quite to that, but this announcement shows that they can continue to live up to that partnership.
So do you think it's not surprising then that Japan is having these investments? As you say, Japan's one of the biggest investors internationally. Like, it wasn't because of pressure from the United States to maybe get things moving?
I do think that in a way that helped. Of course, President Trump has just been so forceful at cajoling allies and saying, hey, it's time to pony up, et cetera. But no, I think ultimately countries will behave based on their own interest. And you're exactly right to point out that Japan's a major investor globally anyway. They have a net international investment position that's almost 100% of GDP. And they have a current account surplus that's about 5% of GDP. So that they've got a lot of cash that they generate. They can go around and invest it. They often target strategic and resource-oriented plays, but they also want to maintain that foothold in the U.S. And last point, if you think about it, the U.S. is also negotiating with China. Japan wants to make sure that they remain the priority in keeping U.S. market share and getting their manufacturing access to the United States for the foreseeable future.
I was just about to bring China into this conversation. Yeah, I mean, given China's kind of increased restrictions on its minerals market, like, how important do you think this is also for the U.S. to secure more deals when it comes to critical minerals?
Well, that's exactly right. So Japan is a critical player in general in filling some of the gaps that could emerge as the U.S. and China continue to reduce their economic dependency, which is, by the way, it's factual. Both sides are reducing their reliance on each other in trade. Japan fills a lot of those gaps, and Japan definitely has the potential to fill gaps in critical minerals, either by investing in production in different countries or doing some of the refining and processing where China has been dominant. So that helps to fulfill that part. But one of the key things that we'll see with other countries as well is that they just want to maintain access to the U.S. market. It's still a growing population, although a little bit slower now that the current administration is cracking down on immigration. But it's still a growing population, huge economy, free market, lots of competition. So you just don't want to lose access to this market in case it continues to become a little bit more protectionist.
Is there a scenario, do you think, though, where Japan delays this investment pledge, particularly if the Supreme Court kind of knocks down, Donald Trump and his tariffs? There's a lot of talk right now that maybe he won't actually be able to impose like those really strong tariff policies. If that happens, could you see Japan delaying this, or is this beneficial for that country too?
Yeah, I think that's really what we're getting at here is that, Japan would have been sort of maybe making a mistake if they had committed too much and if it were purely based on being coerced by the president, and then the Supreme Court shoots it down, and then they look like fools for having committed too much. No, they isolated areas where they thought they had an economic rationale anyway, and they went forward with it. Now, one interesting thing, though, Europe promised a lot of investment in the U.S. as well. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the trajectory of European investment, now remember, Europe provides about 60% of the investment in the United States, and the EU is about 45% total. Well, they basically just assumed, well, we're going to continue investing at the rate that we normally do, and we're going to promise President Trump that we'll do that. And it's a big number, but it's really just the rate that they're currently going on. Yeah. And if Trump loses that tariff tool to coerce Europe, well, then they haven't lost anything either because, hey, they only promised to do what they were already doing.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. Matt Gertken, appreciate it. Thanks for your insight.